Hello, and welcome to the first installment of FALCHI'S Real Estate Facts. In this series, I aim to educate you on the fundamentals one should know when considering making a real estate purchase in New York City. In this first video, I thought it would be helpful to discuss what to consider when deciding between purchasing in a condo or a co-op. There are a few main differences that one should consider: the pricing, subletting policy, owner occupancy, financial liquidity, closing costs, and the board interview. When you are purchasing a condo, you are buying real property, the actual bricks and mortar. Conversely, when you're purchasing in a co-op, you're basically buying shares in a corporation. As such, in a condo, there are no restrictions when it comes to subletting, which makes it an ideal apartment to use as an investment property. This is why, traditionally, condos have higher prices per square foot than co-ops do. In a co-op, you are restricted to the co-op's subletting policy, which is typically no more than 2 years of the first 5 years of ownership. And then the unit must be your primary residence for the remainder of your ownership of the property. There are certainly exceptions to this rule, with some co-ops allowing 2 years as primary, then 2 years of subletting and back to primary, switching indefinitely. But it's worth knowing that these policies change from co-op to co-op with no hard and fast universal rule. This makes co-ops less attractive as investment properties. The subletting rule also affects owner occupancy. As co-op owners have restrictions on subletting, the owner occupancy in co-ops are much higher than condos. This means that your neighbors change less, any renters are highly scrutinized during the vetting process and must be agreed upon by the board. This process guarantees the renter to be financially stable. In a condo, the board approval of a renter is not required, and therefore the level of scrutiny to qualify is much less. Co-ops also have board interviews, and some have fairly in-depth board packages. I'll review board packages and board interviews in more detail in future videos, but for now, we'll sum up the differences by saying that co-ops require board interviews and condos do not. Co-ops have detailed board packages requiring an in-depth look into your finances and references, and again, condos do not. Financial liquidity can be another deciding factor when considering between purchasing in a co-op or a condo. Most people usually only think about the differences in down payment requirements and do not factor in the differing requirements for closing costs and reserves. Firstly, in a co-op, the minimum down payment required is 20%. Whereas in a condo, the minimum down payment is on average only 10%, with a few unicorns slipping even lower. However, in a condo, the closing costs are higher at 4 to 6% of the purchase price, when compared to co-ops at 2 to 4%. I mentioned reserves a little earlier, and it is another difference between condos and co-ops we should discuss. Reserves is a real estate term used to describe the total amount of your monthly mortgage payment added to your maintenance in the case of a co-op, or your common charges and real estate taxes in the case of a condo. Co-op boards typically require a minimum of 24 months of reserves over and above the closing costs and down payment, whereas condos do not have a board requirement for reserves. The only other party who is interested in seeing reserves is your loan officer at the bank. Let's use the example of a $600,000 one-bedroom with the intent of loaning around $500,000. Depending on your interest rate from your bank, a loan of $500,000 will be around a $2,500 mortgage monthly payment. Add that to a typical maintenance for a $600,000 unit, which, to keep the math simple, let's say is $500, making a total monthly payment of $3,000. So let's start with a co-op. In a co-op, the minimum down payment is 20%. So a $600,000 purchase price multiplied by that 20% for the minimum down payment equals $120,000. In a co-op, 24 months of reserves are required, so multiply our $3,000 monthly payment by the 24 months, which equals $72,000. In co-ops, the closing costs are 2 to 4% of the purchase price, which equals $12,000 to $24,000. So the total upfront liquidity requirement for a co-op is $120,000 plus the $72,000 plus the $12,000 to $24,000, totaling $204,000 to $216,000. Now let's use the example of a condo. In a condo, the minimum down payment is 10%. So if we take the same $600,000 purchase price and multiply it by 10%, we get a $60,000 down payment. In the case of a condo, the bank only requires 3 to 6 months of reserves, and so $3,000 multiplied by the 3 to 6 months equals $9,000 to $18,000, and the closing costs in a condo are 4 to 6, which equals $24,000 to $36,000. So if we add those figures, we have a required total liquidity of 60 plus the 9 to 18 plus the 24 to 36 equaling 93 to 114,000 for a condo. So as you can see from the example, financial liquidity makes a major impact on your decision to pursue a co-op over a condo, requiring over double in liquid assets. The final difference I would like to discuss is the approval process. As I mentioned, co-ops require board approval, and they are not required to give a reason for a board turndown. So if the board decides they do not want you to buy in their co-op, they can deny you without providing any reason at all. Madonna was actually once famously denied by a co-op board with no reason given. So if it can happen to Madonna, it can happen to you. However, do not let this concern you too heavily, as in all my years of real estate, it has been extremely rare to see a board package turned down. In the case of a condo, there is only one way a purchase can be blocked, and that is if the condo decides to exercise their right of first refusal and purchase the condo with the building's reserves. Not to be confused with the buyer reserves, building reserves refers to the financial liquidity of the building itself. Funds that are typically used for capital improvement. This is again extremely rare, but is worth mentioning. I hope you have found this first installment of FALCHI'S Real Estate Facts helpful. Please feel free to leave any comments or suggest any topics you would like me to review. I will do my best to get to everyone's requests and will continue to post more videos for my ongoing series, FALCHI'S Real Estate Facts.